Good rising, brethren. This is Big Judah coming to you guys from California. Before I begin, give all praises to the Most High Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother. Who is wisdom? Who is the Holy Spirit? Acknowledgement to Yahweh. I pray the Most High blesses this lesson this evening, gives more knowledge and understanding of the events of the past, in order to understand events that are currently happening on the earth, so we get a much better understanding of the things that are soon to come on the earth. Brother, we're going to get into a little bit of a history and some mysteries surrounding our lands and the things that the Spaniards saw when they got here. Now, we have to understand with history that they really have manipulated everything. Absolutely everything. You're going to read about how, the people that we call Mayans today admit that many of the structures and the things that are in these lands, their people didn't build. And they don't know who constructed, these different pyramids and caves and statues and all these different things were not constructed by the people that are there now. But see, they still push the lies by putting pictures like this on the covers of books. The people that are there in these lands admit that they were not around when these structures were built. But on the covers of the books, they will put people that look like this. And we have to understand that, this is all part of that whole Psalms 83, group has come together to hide everything. So it's like they'll admit some truths, but then they will support the lies other ways. And I'm seeing that with many things worldwide. Like we got all these people in all these different lands, and they have all this different knowledge, but they always try to attribute it to the people that are there right now. Like I've been looking at some Asian movies, some Chinese movies, and they're talking about, the chi, and they're talking about the things that have been handed down from generation to generation. But the thing is that have those people been the ones that have been in these lands the whole time? We know that after the flood, Noah and his sons sat down and all the lands were all divvied up worldwide. And we know that Shem got the lands of hot and cold, Ham got the hot lands, okay, and Japheth got the cold lands. So just by that alone, you start looking at China, and you start seeing how beautiful all the lands are. In Asia, how beautiful a lot of the lands are. Those would seem like Shemitic lands as well. Parts of Africa, parts of America. But see, when we were taken down in Psalms 83 and said that they were going to blot out our name worldwide, I mean, I'm sure that the lands were a big part of that. We're going to read a little bit from this book on this video right now. The first part we're going to read about is called Tunnels of the Titans. Tunnels of the Titans, okay? And it starts around page 52 if you happen to have this book, okay? Talks about the gold, okay? To the Incas, gold was more an element for ornamentation than a medium of exchange. The yellow metal was used for rail roof, gutters, and water pipes. It plated temple walls, and thin sheets of the beaten gold wallpapered their houses. So delicate in workmanship, so exquisite in artistic detail, was some of the jewelry that even the brutish Pizarro refused to melt it into bars. So and there's just so much of it, but the Aborigines didn't use it as a medium of exchange. They didn't use it as money. That was something that was brought on by the Europeans, by the Spanish, okay? I'm going to skip on down here. They're going to start talking about some underground tunnels, okay? Katari, a Quipos reading Incan historian, told Bartolome Cervantes, canon of Chuquisaca, that old records disclose that Tiwanaku was primarily an underground city, extending below the surface into vast caverns. There are legends around Lake Titicaca that Tiwanaku and Cusco are joined by an underground tunnel, and that caverns extend clear through the Andes to the eastern slopes. Beneath Cusco are the entrances to 3 caverns, one being located under the Sun Temple. A number of adventurers during past centuries have entered these caverns, but none returned. Finally, one man came back carrying 2 bars of gold, but with his mind gone. It was then that the Peruvian government ordered the entrances walled up. Now, they knew about, they were exposed to all these tunnels and all these this craftsmanship when they got over here, the Spanish. But they hid all that because, like I said, what was it? They had to make sure that they made it seem as if the Aborigines were, mindless people running around butt naked, in order to justify the things they were going to do to the people here. All of our history had to subsequently have been, destroyed, manipulated, given to someone else. And that's what we see on a consistent basis here. Now, but they do put these things in movies. And if you guys watched, was it Kong versus Godzilla? I think there was a part where they were in California and they got into some kind of a ship or something like that. And I think it took them underground. I thought it took them all the way to like Japan or Hong Kong or something like that. But it was some underground tunnel that went from one part of the world to another. And I totally believe that they have things like this. I know they have, we got tunnels all over the Americas, and they make it sound as if, the people here, recently built all these tunnels. But it seems as if many of these things were already in existence before the Spanish even got here. What other things do you think are stuck under, they're hidden underneath, the land? I know many of us have heard and seen videos of these huge caverns underground and things like that. We've heard of their deep underground military bases, the DUMBs, stuff like that. I think a lot of that was already here. And they talk about that actually a little bit more. We're going to listen to it a little bit more. But so you hear about things like that. You hear about underground bases under the ocean. Things like that. I think there were many, like I said, there were many aspects to our people and many accomplishments that have been hidden. There are certain things on top of the land, with the pyramids, things like that, are easy to be seen. But they talk about many huge complexes underneath the pyramids. And then we're going to read a little bit of that right now. Let's continue here. Alan Landsberg visited Tiwanaku while producing the Jacques Cousteau television documentary on Lake Titicaca. He observed an artificial ridge around an enclosure, approximately 4,000 square yards. I hear that the Bolivian government plans to dig there, he writes. It may find nothing, although there are said to be Incan legends of a honeycomb of tunnels at Tiwanaku and of great vertical shafts. Any subterranean chambers at Tiwanaku may have long since collapsed or filled with dirt. Still, the solid evidence of that 4,000-yard earthworks seems meaningful. Another legend is that Tupac Amaru, the Incan leader, with several thousand soldiers and refugees in 1533, escaped through tunnels east of Cusco from Pizarro and his men, a route leading into the unexplored jungle territory of northern Bolivia. Now, I've read about things like that where Pizarro was chasing many of the natives, the Incans, and they escaped. And I think they escaped carrying their llamas full of like gold and things like that. There was many things that they didn't get their hands on. I think it was the one of the books talking about Crespi and how they got away and they got into the jungles, and that's how these natives go in there now, and they come back and are bringing Crespi all of these artifacts because many, they only got some of them. There were many artifacts that are still hidden in the Amazon rainforest, that they never could find. And there's many cities there that glow at night. Huge caverns that we're talking about. I'm sure housing many of our treasures that the Most High is going to give back to us once again. And that's what you're seeing right now. You're seeing the Father. He's renewing our minds. He's renewing our spirits. He's teaching us to think outside of the box, outside of the box that we've been, constricted to. Don't think about this. Don't look at that. This is the history that we gave you. There's no alternative. So the Most High has opened up our minds so we can be able to receive this information. I'm sure there's many immense treasures that are still waiting for us in these different parts of the world. Most High let these jungles grow up and cover many of these cities that these people are finding with LiDAR, when they're flying over with their lasers, and they're finding all these huge cities that they could never see before, and all these different remote locations. And now this is being brought out right now, which is now pretty much exposing all of the lies that the Europeans have been saying about our people here and the accomplishments and the things that were going on over here before the Europeans showed up. So let's continue. After almost every earthquake in Peru, puzzling sounds are heard. They are described as comparable to the sounds of huge boulders falling under the Earth's surface, as though dropping from the roofs of caves to the floors. The sounds frequently continue as long as 20 minutes after the quake itself, one dominant characteristic being a hollow, booming noise with apparent echoes. But reports of tunnels and caves are not limited to the Andean countries, but exist throughout the southern Americas. Many ancient ruins are above man-made burrows. 50 miles south of Mexico City, archaeologists have found the remains of a Toltec pyramid that once covered a larger area than the Great Pyramid of Egypt. Beneath it are labyrinth passages 1,100 yards long. Fuentes, a Spanish historian who lived about 1685 AD, wrote the marvelous structure of the tunnels, of the Pueblo of Pachuta, being of the most firm and solid cement, runs and continues through the interior of the land for the prolonged distance of 9 leagues to the Pueblo of Tecpan, Guatemala. It is a proof of the power of these ancient kings and their vassals. Yucatan, with its lost and silent temples and the green hell of the jungle, rests on a limestone strata honeycombed with caves. Some of these caves were apparently used as oracles. Others are said to lead to carvings deep in the bowels of the earth. They are well known to the Mayas, who lived here millennia ago, but today are largely unexplored. Some have carved figures at their entrances, and the natives refuse to enter them. So, you think that in these movies that they come up with these kinds of things on their own. You think about Aquaman and how, they talk about the whole hollow earth and how he, gets back into contact with his mother, and they find this whole Eden-like area underground. So I definitely believe that they are aware of these places underneath the earth. Because like I said, you understand that the Gentiles don't come up with any of these things on their own. But they bring out our information and act like, oh, we're just really, really creative, with our thinking. No, they're not. They know that these places exist. I'm sure that they have our records and they've, seen it. I'm sure they've been exploring as much as they can, different areas right now. You hear about these, underground bases or underground tunnels and, how they can go from one part of the country to the other underground. And just like they had that high-speed rail system in the movie with King Kong and Godzilla, I'm sure that many of you guys will be able to come into the comment section and add even more information. There's things that we can see here on the top of the earth and things like that, but I'm sure that what's underneath the earth is probably going to be very mind-blowing if we were to ever when we actually get this information once again. Let's see here. Continue. Yucatan, with its lost and silent temples in the green hell. Well, let's continue. The greatest subterranean cave associated with ancient man that is known to definitely exist is the vast Lultan cave complex and the Puc Hills of central Yucatan. From the huge chamber inside the entrance, corridors lead off into various directions, like the petals of the gargantuan flower, hence its name, Lultan, flower in stone. No one knows how far or how deep into the cave or into the dark bowels of the earth these spacious passageways go, for they are still largely unexplored. Yeah, and if they were exploring them, they're not going to tell us what they're finding, right? Now you think about it. Now you hear about what happened in the Grand Canyon and the discoveries there, and how when they went to the Grand, the doctor from went in there from the Smithsonian Institute, and he was talking about the things that he found, and these huge complexes, in the stone, and all of a sudden, a day later, oh no, that's not true, and there's nothing there, and there's all these different areas of the Grand Canyon that people are not allowed to go to. So this kind of confirms what we're seeing here as far as things being under the ground, cave complexes, cities underground, cities being connected, over vast distances underground. It just makes you think. And we understand now that they're hiding everything. So when you get to the whole Psalms 83 and how they come together to keep the name of Israel, out of the world, that's also the accomplishments. There's all these different places, different buildings, different things under the earth, different stories. And they don't have an answer for them, but they just hide this information. So the Most High makes them write these books so that for a time, for the 500 plus years that they were in charge, these books were being written, but they were being written for when we awaken, when the Most High awakened us, and to lead us to this information. And we realized that there were all these accomplishments that have been hidden because the rest of the world didn't want people to know what we were doing, what we were capable of. And as dark as Earth's bowels in this antiquity of man's occupation of these caverns, from stalactites and stalagmites and rock pillars have been carved gigantic statues of animals, men, and gods. Some are Mayan in origin, but there are strange older ones, along with puzzling petroglyphs that in no way are similar to Mayan carvings. The men display luxuriant beards. One figure is a 9-foot giant with a full beard and wings that is reminiscent of early Assyrian sculpture. Its body is perforated with holes both vertically and horizontally. But the most startling fact is one that reminds us of Tiwanaku and confirms the astonishing antiquity of man in the Americas. Dr. Manson Valentine, the archaeologist who has made the most intensive study of the cave complex, tells us that the older statues indicate the caves were underwater after they were carved. They were water eroded, and there are watermarks on the cavern walls. Moreover, divers exploring the nearby sacred wells have brought up oceanic marine growth from the bottoms. Today, this complex is several hundred feet above sea level. How long ago was it beneath the sea? What cataclysms caused this limestone strata to sink and later be raised above the ocean? And who were these people of a dim dawn era who emerged from an enigmatic eon and vanished into a limbo of the lost? Dr. Valentine writes, the present-day Maya say that they as a race had nothing whatsoever to do with such carvings in Lultan and nearby caves. They say these things were placed there by the first inhabitants of Yucatan, the small hunchbacked men they called Pus. Like I said, now, they don't know. So they give you a little bit of truth, but then they try to go ahead and switch it in. It wasn't us, but it was these people for sure. If you guys weren't there, then you don't know. These men were supposed to have been completely destroyed by a catastrophe that swept Yucatan in remote times, destroying everything on the surface and leaving only the carvings in the caves as reminders that they had passed that away. They had passed that away. The Maya say that later their ancestors, the first Maya, entered and found these strange remnants of the Pus. Now you kind of think about how they put these things also in movies, like Lord of the Rings. And who was it supposed to be? The actually was building, underneath the ground, the dwarfs, right? It kind of like reminiscent of these Pus, small hunchbacks, who actually went underground and built, these underground cities that went from one side of a mountain to another. You see that they're putting our information in these movies. Just made that connection right now. Dealing with the dwarves, and in the first movie when they went, underneath the ground because they couldn't go over the mountain, so they were going to go through it. And talking about how they dug too deep, and they got released demons. That's what was chasing them at the when they were trying to get out of those caves and caverns. But you see, they get this information. Just imagine what they found. Imagine what they saw. Because in the movie, when they got to the certain area, it was this grand. When he gave a little bit more light, and you could see, how they built these cities underground and how just grand and awesome they looked. I'm sure that's exactly what the Spanish got a chance to see. But they couldn't tell the other Europeans that, who were dying and, and all this disease, living in their feces, couldn't read, couldn't write, not clean, that they came over here and found a paradise, not only on top of the ground, but also underneath. How these people were building structures that were just so much more advanced than anything that they had seen. They couldn't tell the world that. So they had to make it seem as if we were, the backwards people, and that they were coming to bring us up in society, to teach us how to live. But that's exactly what's been going on this whole time. And they put this information in movies and try to attribute it to what? The dwarfs. But see, but in the cover of the book, they make it seem as if, these were the ones who were building everything. These were the people. But inside the book, they admit that those weren't the people that built it. But they'll tell you who it was for sure, but they weren't there. Said, this is why the Most High is definitely renewing our minds. We had to be taught who we are. And that's why they talk about the Egyptians saying, know thyself. Know thyself. That's what we have to know. Children of light have to know ourselves. Know that, we are not just these physical beings. We are spiritual beings. And the Most High is definitely working us back to, getting understanding here of the physical, so that then we can, grow in the physical. We can grow in into spiritual. And then we can raise up our spirits up to the Father. It's about raising our spiritual awareness. Ultimately, that's what it's about. We get in the physical understanding, but that is just a stepping stone to increase our spiritual awareness and spiritual uplifting to the Father. What we're experiencing, we're just in these bodies having a brief physical experience here in this world, in this matrix. But ultimately, it is for our spiritual growth, our spiritual race back to the Father. And it's amazing. So when you learn how to look through, the spiritual eyes more, you start to see how spiritually they have been, definitely stunting our growth. Keeping information from us, making the things that actually work for the spirit, making those kinds of things taboo. But we'll get into that more in another video. All praise is to the Most High Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother. Who is wisdom? Who is the Holy Spirit? Acknowledgement to Yahweh Shai. Shalom.